Welcome to Heart Tales. Before we begin today's story, please take a moment to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much. I spent 10 full years conquering a yandere female lead. Just as my favorability score hit 100 and I was preparing to exit this mission world, she slowly slithered up around my neck from behind. Be a good boy, my little traveler. How about we deduct 20 favorability points? From that moment on, my favorability score began to be dictated directly by her words. Ding. Favorability plus 20. My little traveler performed so well tonight. Reward him with 30 favorability points. Ding. Favorability plus 30. When on earth will these days ever end? Ding. Favorability plus 1. The emotionless mechanical chime rang out in my head once more. Dazed, I turned my gaze toward the woman fast asleep on the bed. Delicate features, porcelain white skin. There was no denying that Lillian was easily the most gorgeous female lead I had ever conquered. My eyes drifted across her jade-like collarbone, where faint, mottled marks were still visible. The fresh imprints I had left behind not too long ago. The very next second, I spoke without a shred of hesitation. System, transfer me to the next world. Understood, host. Departing this world in 3 seconds. 3, 2. Ding. Female lead Lillian's favorability is dropping. Ding. Favorability dropped to 0. System has determined the mission failed. Please continue the conquest. I froze completely. Favorability plunging from 100 to 0 in a single second. What's wrong? Does my little traveler not like the surprise gift I prepared for him? Without me even realizing when she had woken up, Lillian was sitting there, her pale eyes staring at me with eerily calm intensity. What do you mean by this? I asked, my voice dropping cold. Lillian sat up, the blanket sliding down her body in slow motion. The next second, her ice-cold palm rested lightly against my throat, her voice chillingly terrifying. My little traveler, were you trying to run away to this time? Every survival instinct in my body screamed danger. The Lillian in front of me was entirely different from any female lead I had ever encountered. In this lifetime, don't even dream of going anywhere. Her gentle whisper brushed against my ear, leaving my entire body stiff as a board. Lillian was the 15th female lead I had ever conquered. When I first met her, she was only 15 years old. Back when she was 15, Lillian was gentle and polite to everyone. Yet toward me, she maintained a cold, distant front. From our very first meeting, I knew she couldn't stand me. At the time, I played the rich young heir transferring into her school, standing on the podium to introduce myself. Hello everyone, my name is Jason. When my eyes locked with Lillian's in the classroom below, I froze. Her gaze was brimming with intense disgust and bitter hatred. In the system's official profile, the word used most frequently to describe Lillian was gentle. But only I knew that in that precise moment, she utterly loathed me. Because of that, conquering her took me 10 whole years. I had carefully monitored the favorability score, watching it creep up bit by bit from 0 all the way to 100, only to plummet right back to 0 in a single second. My heart felt completely shattered. The next second, I felt a warm moisture against my ear. Snapping out of my daze, I heard Lillian's soft, gentle chuckle right beside me. Are you confused as to why, my little traveler? I tilted my head, looking at the slight wave of her dark hair in my field of vision, and let out a soft sigh. Just, how much do you actually know? If I said I know everything, would you believe me, Jason? I pulled her face away from my shoulder and looked straight into her eyes with utmost seriousness. Lillian, I need you to trust me. I swear I'll come back for you. Do you really think I can still believe a single word you say? Lillian's dark eyes were like a still, fathomless lake, chillingly cold. Seeing me freeze in shock, her expression softened once more. My little traveler, be good, okay? Just stay by my side. Won't you? I closed my eyes and whispered, fine. Lillian pressed a soft kiss against my lips. What a good boy. How about I reward you with 20 favorability points? My eyes snapped open in utter astonishment, meeting her gaze filled with deep, terrifying affection. The very next second, the mechanical voice rang out in my head once again. Ding. Female lead Lillian's favorability score plus 20. I had guessed that Lillian might have figured something out, but I never imagined she would actually know about the favorability score itself. How on earth did she find out? As the thought crossed my mind, I asked her directly. Lillian gently stroked my hair to soothe me. Don't be scared, Jason. I would never hurt you. Impossible. Trapping me in this world was the greatest harm she could ever inflict on me. I didn't say the words out loud, merely staring at the girl before me. The unhinged madness hidden deep within her eyes sent a suffocating lump to my throat. I had long since passed the point of no return. Seeming to sense the sorrow washing over me, Lillian turned her head away, breaking eye contact. Jason, her voice sounded unnaturally calm. I'll give you your favorability points. Once I grow tired of this, I'll let you leave. All right. I managed to choke out from the back of my throat. Lillian and I were nothing more than marionettes, pulled by unseen strings. The next morning, after Lillian left for work, I summoned the system inside my head. What on earth is going on with Lillian? She even knows about the favorability points? The system replied in its flat, unfeeling mechanical tone. According to system diagnostics, the female lead Lillian is functioning completely normally. I let out a cold sneer. I sure hope so. That evening, Lillian finally returned home. I was sitting on the sofa in the living room, waiting for her. The moment she saw me, her eyes lit up with pure joy, and she pounced on me like a needy kitten. Jason, I thought you'd never want to see me again. Her voice carried a soft, aggrieved whimper. I gently pushed her head away from the crook of my neck. Stop acting, Lillian. Lillian froze for a moment, then slowly lifted her head to stare at me. Every trace of emotion vanished from her eyes. Not a single flicker of warmth remained. Jason, can't we just go back to how things used to be? No. Her expression turned instantly frost-cold. Perhaps this was the true Lillian all along. The very next second, she grabbed my wrist and dragged me upstairs toward the bedroom. I offered zero resistance. As her fierce, overwhelming kisses rained down upon me, I caught her broken, despairing whisper. Jason, you can't be this cruel to me. When I woke up the following morning, the favorability score had dropped right back down to 0 once again. I understood all too well. This was Lillian's punishment for my attitude last night. She wanted to make it crystal clear that whether I could leave this world or not rested entirely in her hands. And I knew with absolute certainty that Lillian would never let me go. This situation was a total dead end, unless I found another way out. System, besides completing the mission, is there any other way to exit a mission world? The system's voice echoed in my head. I couldn't tell if I was just imagining things, but there almost seemed to be a trace of helpless resignation in its tone. There is no other way. Host, isn't staying in this world actually wonderful? The system can sense that Lillian is special to you. Yes, she was special. She was the driving force that had kept me moving forward through countlessly desperate mission worlds. But special was as far as it went. Across this entire journey, I had completed the conquest of 15 worlds. My overall mission was nearing its absolute end. Very soon, I would finally come face to face with the entity that had been manipulating me for so long. I couldn't stop now. Where is Marcus right now? Marcus was the original male lead of this world. He was the one who was supposed to end up with Lillian in the original storyline. But I had intervened so heavily that they never even had the chance to meet. Now, it was high time for Marcus to make his entrance. Late that afternoon, Lillian returned home, carrying a slice of durian crepe cake in her hands. Her gorgeous face remained as ice-cold as ever. It was rare for me to show her a smile, but today I offered her one. Lillian stepped closer, placing the cake onto the tea table. Jason, why are you in such a good mood today? Isn't that a good thing? It's great. She sat down beside me, pulling me into her arms and softly resting her chin on my shoulder, her warm breath brushing against my arm. Jason, let's go out together tomorrow. The arms wrapping around me stiffened slightly. Only after a long pause did I reply in a quiet voice. All right. The following day, I brought Lillian to an elegant, high-end restaurant. When the car pulled up in front of the venue, Lillian shot me a bone-chilling glance. Feeling a slight pang of guilt, I nevertheless took her hand and led her inside. As we settled into our table, Lillian's expression remained heavy and frigid. Right on cue, the soothing, melodious sounds of a piano began to fill the room. Avoiding her penetrating gaze, I turned my attention toward the performance stage located right behind her. On the stage stood a young man bathed in bright sunlight. With handsome features and fair skin, he looked just like a prince stepping right out of a fairy tale. He was none other than Marcus, the original male lead of this world. The moment his eyes met mine, a radiant smile broke across his face. Raising his hand, he subtly signaled the number 7 to me, referring to the 7 zeros of our agreed payment. I pulled my gaze back to the girl sitting opposite me. Lillian was still staring at me intently. Out of nowhere, she asked softly, "Jason, why are you so desperate to leave?" I saw the intense, burning love shimmering deep within her eyes. In that split second, I was almost tempted to spill everything to her. But in the end, I kept my mouth shut because this world simply did not belong to me. I listened as my own cold voice replied, "I can't take the risk." The system was still lurking inside my head. Even if there was a possibility that Lillian had somehow gained control over it, I couldn't afford to gamble. The agonizing memories, the despairing experiences, they were burdens I had to bear completely alone. The light in Lillian's eyes vanished completely as Marcus approached. Lillian had been completely intoxicated by me. She was never one to drink, yet today she had consumed a massive amount of alcohol. I drove the car and brought the two of them to a nearby hotel. Watching Marcus help the drunken Lillian into the elevator, a sudden wave of regret washed over me, though it lasted for only a fleeting moment. Marcus himself seemed a bit terrified. Turning his head back toward me, he asked anxiously, "Jason, do you really want to go through with this?" Hearing those words, a momentary pang of regret flashed through my mind, but it vanished just as quickly. "If anything happens, call me immediately." Without looking back, I turned around, left the hotel, and drove away. By the time Marcus called me, it was already well past 1 in the morning. On the line, his voice was choked with frantic sobs. Jason, Ms. Lillian, she slit her wrists." Bang! It felt like a snapped wire exploded in my brain. When I rushed to the hospital, Lillian was out of danger, though she remained unconscious. Marcus was huddled in the hallway outside the ward, trembling all over from sheer panic. Upon seeing me, a flicker of resentment even surfaced in his eyes. "Jason, I genuinely think Ms. Lillian loves you with all her heart. Why on earth would you treat her like this?" I stared quietly at the girl lying on the hospital bed through the glass window, my fists clenching silently at my sides. Misunderstanding my silence, Marcus pressed on. "Ms. Lillian would rather slit her own wrists than let me touch her." I opened my mouth, but not a single word came out. Wait, something isn't right. I suddenly caught on to a terrifying detail. None of this made sense. Lillian was merely drunk. She had countless ways to reject the male lead. Why on earth would she choose such an extreme path as suicide? "You should head home for now. I'll be in touch if anything comes up," I told him quietly. I pushed open the door, stepped into the ward, and sat down beside her bed. The face before me was deathly pale, her long eyelashes still damp with tears, her brow slightly furrowed in deep unrest. It felt as though, in this lifetime, ever since I met her again, she hadn't been the same person as before. In previous lives, she was always full of wild, carefree smiles, dragging me to internet cafes, pulling me along to skip classes. But in this lifetime, she simply stared at me in quiet silence, her eyes simultaneously innocent and dangerously unpredictable. I could faintly sense that trapped deep within Lillian's heart was a wild beast, merely waiting for the right moment to break free and devour everything. Just what on earth had she gone through? When Lillian finally woke up, I was still sitting right beside her. Her voice rasped weakly. Turning my head, I realized her eyes were already wide open, staring at me as if she had been awake for a long time. "You're awake? You've been unconscious for a few days, but the doctor said there are no major complications. Just make sure not to let your wrist touch water for the next few days, and after a while." "Jason," Lillian cut off my rambling chatter, her voice hauntingly gentle. "I had a dream." "What kind of dream?" Deep down, I had a faint inkling. It was probably memories from our past lives. I could easily have played dumb and pretended not to know a thing. But the moment my eyes met Lillian's, every single layer of my psychological defense crumbled to dust. Reflected in her eyes was a shattered, bottomless despair. Looking up at me, her voice trembled terribly. I dreamed that my little traveler died. He died on his 25th birthday. I instinctively dodged her gaze. Without warning, Lillian ripped out her 4-needle and sat straight up in bed. Startled, I rushed over to check on her, only to be yanked into a scorching hot embrace. "Why won't you just admit it?" Lillian whispered right in my ear. Her hold tightened relentlessly, her tone edging into mad desperation. "Why won't you trust me? Why?" I tried to struggle, but eventually went limp in her arms. Lillian was crying. Her scalding tears soaked through the fabric over my shoulder. A sharp, unbearable ache tore through my chest. "Stop crying." My voice was so hoarse it was barely audible. Lillian trembled slightly, slowly letting go of me and lifting her head. Her eyelashes were drenched with tears, her posture submissive, yet her pale eyes remained eerily calm. "Is my little traveler still planning to abandon me?" I squeezed my eyes shut, not daring to look at her. "Lillian, I have no idea what you're talking about." "Then why don't you dare open your eyes and look at me?" "Lillian, stop living in those illusions." I gave in to her demand and opened my eyes to face her, filling my gaze with nothing but cold indifference. I watched as the spark of hope in her eyes died out, bit by bit. Standing up, I took 2 slow steps back. "I hope you keep your promise. Once you're bored, let me go." Lillian said nothing and didn't spare me another glance. She simply lowered her head in silence, her thoughts completely unreadable. The silence was deafening, suppressing the rising panic in my chest. I turned around and walked out of the ward. The moment I stepped outside, the system inside my head practically shrieked. "Host, what on earth are you hesitating for? The two of you love each other. Wouldn't it be wonderful to just stay in this world with the female lead?" "No, it wouldn't." I snapped back without a moment's hesitation, though my eyes burned with pure bitterness. There was zero chance I would back down in this final world. After our confrontation in the hospital, I had assumed Lillian wouldn't come looking for me anytime soon. But to my complete surprise, she discharged herself just a few days later, clinging to me as if nothing had ever happened. Every move in this game was being dictated by Lillian, leaving me completely powerless. My sense of dread grew with each passing day, while Lillian became increasingly possessive, following me wherever I went, refusing to let me out of her sight. "Why were you staring at me instead of giving her your attention?" Lillian's gaze grew darker and gloomier with each passing day. Truth be told, I rarely dreamed, but during that stretch of time, I found myself trapped in bizarre dreams almost every single night. At times, I dreamed of the tragedy that claimed my parents, seared with vivid images of being trapped inside a roaring inferno. Other times, I dreamed of my very first life with Lillian. She had cornered me in a dark alley, kissing my lips with frantic, reckless passion. I had feigned resistance, only to sink deeper and deeper into her pull. I was growing more despairing by the day. There were moments I caught myself thinking that staying here wouldn't be so bad after all. But immediately, the horrific sight of my parents' and sister's tragic deaths would flash across my mind. Then finally, one day, Lillian relented. She agreed to visit True Happy High School with me, promising that once we walked through it together, she would let me go. A dizzying rush of sheer disbelief washed over me. "Really?" Lillian stared at me for a long time, her voice unnaturally calm. "We're leaving right now." I grabbed my phone and headed toward the door, but Lillian remained frozen in place, refusing to budge. I turned back to look at her suspiciously. "Did you change your mind?" A brief flicker of unreadable emotion crossed Lillian's eyes. After a heavy silence, she began walking toward me. Instinctively, I took 2 steps back. Lillian paused briefly. "Aren't you coming?" "Yes." I quickly fell into step behind her. All along the way, I stole glances at Lillian's expression, terrified she might be fooling me. But her gaze remained fathomless and calm, completely devoid of any visible abnormality. When we arrived at True Happy High School, the security guards simply glanced at our license plate before waving us inside, likely because Lillian had arranged it in advance. Both sides of the campus drive were lined with cherry blossom trees. It happened to be the transition between spring and summer, and soft pink petals bloomed in full glory across the branches. Lillian and I had spent the 3 best years of our lives right here, in both of our lifetimes. I've met all kinds of people. Lillian suddenly spoke up. I turned around to look at her. The midday sunlight was harsh and dazzling, casting glare everywhere and making it impossible to read her face clearly. Lillian asked softly, "Do you remember the tree in front of us?" My eyes followed her gaze, and the expression on my face shifted instantly. It was under that very tree that I had shared my first kiss with Lillian. You were the 4th person sent to conquer me. I hid under that tree. What do you mean by that? My expression finally broke. An overwhelming dread surged in my chest. I had envisioned so many possibilities. Maybe she had been reincarnated, or maybe she was a task taker like me, or perhaps she was being manipulated by the god mind. But it had never once crossed my mind that she could be just like me, having dragged herself through countless lifetimes, thoroughly consumed by despair. Lillian acted as though she didn't see the terror on my face, her voice remaining as eerily gentle as ever. I remember in one lifetime, there were dozens of task takers sent to conquer me. Almost everyone around me was replaced. Lillian paused for a moment. She reached out her hand, softly wiping the corner of my eye. Don't cry anymore. It wasn't your fault. Tears streamed down my face. I genuinely didn't know what to say. I wanted to scream that I hadn't been living well either, that my entire family had been butchered by the so-called God mind, all because it wanted to orchestrate my tragic arc as a male lead straight out of a book. All because Lillian loved me. I wanted to tell her that I had actually committed suicide once, only to be bound to the system after death, forced to conquer 14 other female leads across different worlds over all these years. In the beginning, I was utterly clueless. I was trapped in that very first world for several hundred years, repeating it countless times before finally succeeding in conquering her. I wanted to tell her, all my suffering was because you loved me. Because you loved me, my family died horribly. Because you loved me, I spent years drowning in endless pain. In the end, I said nothing. Once my tears ran dry, I spoke in a deadpan voice. Can you let me go now? Lillian's eyes turned bright red. All right, I'll let you go. Just give me one last hug. Why did it suddenly feel so cold? Lillian's voice choked up as she buried her face against my chest. Live a good life. Lillian wrapped her arms tightly around me. Beep. Favorability +20. Current favorability 100. Departing this world in 3 seconds. 3, 2. I held my breath. As the system's unfeeling voice echoed in my head, my consciousness gradually faded away. In the darkness, I caught Lillian's final whisper. Truthfully, I just wanted to hold on to you for a few days longer. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a hospital ward, the sharp, overwhelming stench of disinfectant filling my lungs. System, is this the God mind's world? No one answered me. System, where is the God mind? Inside my head, there was still complete and utter silence. System, are you there? In a haze of confusion, realization began to dawn on me. I buried my face in my arms, a creeping sense of panic rising within me. Beep! Overjoyed, I snapped my head up. System! Before I could finish, the door to the ward pushed open, and a woman dressed in white walked in. Sis! I opened my mouth, my voice uncertain. Sis, what? Do you have any idea you passed out from hypoglycemia? The woman scolded me, her beautiful face etched with a worry that was painfully familiar. Getting you to eat breakfast is harder than reaching the stars. I threw myself into her arms. Sis, it's so good to see you okay. I sobbed uncontrollably. Chloe looked at me helplessly. What's with you? Crying like I'm dead or something. I stayed silent. Years ago, my sister Chloe and I were trapped in a roaring inferno. She had shielded me the entire time. In reality, She could have easily escaped, but because I was pinned beneath a fallen wardrobe, she stayed by my side to face death together. She had even smiled to comfort me. I'm right here with you. Mom and Dad are gone. You're my only hope to keep living. Later, across all those transmigrations, that memory remained a deeply buried scar in my heart. Fortunately, I had my sister back. Over the next few days, I received video calls from my parents. Everything was so wonderful it felt almost surreal. I lived in this world for a few more days, my state of mind gradually stabilizing. So, I really came back to my original world, back to my normal life, to the time before I ever transmigrated into that book. Will everything that happened after still occur? The moment the thought surfaced in my mind, I forced myself to extinguish it. I didn't want any of it to repeat. This was good enough. Unconsciously, I avoided thinking about Lillian. Yet the more I tried to push her out of my mind during the day, the more frequently she invaded my dreams at night. The very first time I transmigrated into the book, Lillian was 15 years old, while I had just turned 17 in the real world. Back then, she had a wealthy background and striking beauty. On my very first day as a transfer student, Lillian had cornered me right at the classroom door. Jason. I had stared at her, completely bewildered. Her jet-black eyes scanned me from head to toe before she smiled and said, "Your pants are on backward." I looked down at the seams of my trousers, then looked up at Lillian and stammered, Thank you." Perhaps I had said thank you a little too sincerely, because a trace of amusement flickered in Lillian's eyes. "I'm Lillian." Lillian as in mist and smoke. I paused for a second, feeling as though the name sounded vaguely familiar. "Thank you, Lillian." Meeting her expectant gaze, I let out a gentle sigh and thanked her once more. Lillian chuckled softly. "You're pretty cute, Jason." It wasn't until a few days later that I realized why the name Lillian sounded so familiar. She was the female lead in a novel I had read. I knew that according to the original plot, Lillian would meet the male lead when she turned 23, falling madly and hopelessly in love with him at first sight. My own name, on the other hand, didn't appear in the book at all. Because of that, I went out of my way to avoid her for a long time. Truth be told, it wasn't even entirely about avoiding her. I was desperately trying to find a way back home, so I soon pushed her to the back of my mind. My transmigration was incredibly strange. It felt as though I had merely dozed off at my desk, only to wake up in a completely different world. Because of this, it took me a long time to blend in, looking at everyone around me with a cold, rational, yet pitiful detachment. Lillian stopped approaching me as well, and it was as if our very first encounter on my first day of school had never happened. That was until some time later, when I ran into Lillian in a dark alleyway outside the school. Lillian was leaning against the wall, covered in bloodstains. She paused for a moment when her eyes landed on me. I let out a sigh and walked over to her. In truth, I had wanted to pretend I hadn't seen her at all. "Are you all right?" I asked, believing my voice sounded perfectly gentle. Later on, Lillian told me that my gaze back then was filled with pity and disgust, like a deity looking down on mere mortals. In that moment, however, Lillian's eyes simply dimmed slightly. Then, her voice rasped softly. "Does it look to you like I'm all right, Jason?" I dialed 911 right in front of her. Watching her expression grow increasingly heavy, she asked quietly, "Jason, am I really so terrifying that you have to avoid me? Why are you hiding from me at school?" "Don't misunderstand," I replied casually. "My family doesn't allow me to wander around after school." Lillian looked at the backpack on my shoulders, her voice tinged with a faint melancholy. "School ended at 6:30, and it's already 8 o'clock now." "Oh, if you're so late, why haven't you gone home?" "What does that have to do with you?" I answered lazily. Lillian lifted the hem of her school uniform jacket, let out a soft laugh, and pointed toward a dumpster not far away. "This isn't my blood anyway. The guy who's actually hurt is over there." Even after that incident ended, I remained the same as always, incapable of caring about a single thing, until I noticed that my desk mate at the time seemed to be getting bullied at school. That was the moment I suddenly felt like I was truly living in this world, because I so rarely felt anger. In the sweltering heat of summer, that delicate girl wore an autumn school uniform, zipped up tight from head to toe. I called out to her, Lily, are you all right? Finally, one day, I couldn't hold it in any longer and spoke up. Not far away, Lillian lifted her head as well, her eyes carrying a tinge of melancholy as she looked toward me. I froze, suddenly recalling the last time I helped call an ambulance for Lillian, when I had asked that exact same question. Are you all right? Instantly, Lillian turned her head away, as if our shared glance a moment prior had been nothing more than an illusion. Lily stared at me for a moment before replying in a cold voice, I'm fine. It was only then that I realized just how stunningly beautiful the girl sitting in front of me actually was. Lily paused for a second, her tone chillingly distant. Mind your own business. Back then, if it had been anyone else's business, I probably would have walked away. But this was different. If I didn't help her now, then if I ever face something similar in the future, how could I blame others for standing by and watching with cold indifference? I observed Lily for several days and noticed her life was remarkably simple. Aside from attending school, she went straight home and went nowhere else. Even during recess, she just sat silently in the classroom. Could she be suffering from domestic abuse at home? I looked at the girl sitting properly at her desk and decided I would secretly follow her home after school. That day, I trailed her all the way to her front door. Hearing harsh shouting and sobbing echoing from inside the house, my hands trembled as I pulled out my phone to call the police, then ducked into a dark corner. I watched as a very refined-looking man was led away in a police car, and I caught a gentle, relieved smile from Lily aimed right at me. The moment I turned around, I spotted Lillian leaning against a wall not far away. I gave her a subtle nod, walking with light steps as I brushed past her. The very next day, during morning physical education, Lily leaped from the 6th floor of the academic building, passing away right before my very eyes. In the middle of the chaotic panic, Lillian reached out and covered my eyes. Her breathing trembled violently, yet her voice remained remarkably firm. Jason, this has nothing to do with you. Lillian surely didn't realize just how much those words meant to me. Just as I was about to retreat into my shell, Lillian stepped firmly to my side, covered my eyes, and pulled me back into this world. It turned out Lily truly had taken her own life, and indeed, it had nothing to do with me. Before committing suicide, she had written in her diary, "At long last, I finally waited for someone to come save me. But I've also come to realize that no one can ever truly save me." After that incident, the bond between Lillian and me seemed to grow much closer. I no longer avoided her, nor did I resist integrating into this world anymore. Lillian began walking with me to and from school every day. One morning on our way to class, Lillian suddenly remarked, I don't think I've ever seen your parents." Hearing that made my heart skip a beat. She was right. In this world, I had seemingly never seen my own family. It was as though I had simply materialized out of thin air. Noticing the shift in my expression, the light in Lillian's eyes dimmed slightly. The next second, she smiled and patted my shoulder. "Jason, if you don't want to talk about it, that's completely fine." Why? All throughout our walk, I kept asking myself that question. Lillian treated me so well that I could no longer view her as merely a female lead in a book. Lillian confessed her feelings to me during the summer break after our college entrance exams. Dressed in a white dress, she still carried her usual pride, yet her eyes were unwavering. "Jason, I've liked you for a really long time. Don't you believe me?" Lillian looked a bit anxious. "It's true. I really fell in love with you at first sight." "I don't believe you," I replied. I hadn't forgotten that in the original novel, she had also fallen in love with the male lead at first sight. Lillian froze, falling silent for a moment before asking softly, "Is everything really that real to you? Whether I say it's true or not, if you don't believe it, what does it matter?" "It does matter. You have to believe me," she insisted. "The moment you stood on that podium introducing yourself, I was already drawn to you. Back in that alley, even though your eyes were filled with disgust and detachment, I kept trying so hard to find things to talk about with you. And regarding Lily, I actually really wanted to tell you that you were truly amazing." Watching Lillian's hands and eyes turn red, an overwhelming surge of emotion welled up inside my chest. Clenching my teeth, I said, "Then, let me give us a try. To hell with the male lead. We'll figure out the future when it comes. And that try ended up lasting for more than 7 years. Her love was both pure and fiercely passionate, and I was completely consumed by it. The male lead seemed to vanish entirely as the plot shifted. As time passed, Lillian's love for me grew only more intense. When did the change begin? Perhaps on Lillian's 23rd birthday. According to the original plot, that was the day she was supposed to meet the male lead. But on that day, Lillian was unusually clingy. She skipped the birthday party that had been prepared for her, wrapped her arms around me, and demanded kisses nonstop, asking me over and over again, "Will my little Jason stay with me forever?" At first, I answered her patiently, but she asked so many times that I eventually lost my patience and tossed out a casual, "No." Hearing that single word triggered something inside Lillian. In a voice thick with hurt and despair, she repeated over and over, "I really do love you." Lillian rarely spoke such tender words of love. Phrasings like, "I love you" were usually blurted out with fierce possessiveness. "I freaking love you to death." It was only much later that I finally understood. On that exact day, Lillian's memories had fully awakened. She had learned of her original fate. Naturally, she also realized how different I was, and she grew terrified that I would leave her. For the next 2 years, our life together was relatively peaceful. Lillian remained deeply attached to me, though at times, her gaze held a look I couldn't quite decipher. I would smile and comfort her, saying that things would no longer follow the original storyline. Back then, I naively thought that changing the plot was really that simple. When I woke up, I was still smiling. "System, what's the favorability score now?" The moment the words left my mouth, I suddenly realized that everything had started over from the beginning. The system had vanished entirely from my world. Why did the system disappear? When it first bound itself to me, it clearly stated that after completing the missions across 15 worlds, I would meet the God Mind. Yet here I was back in the real world, with my family restored to life. It felt almost like a reward bestowed upon me by the God Mind. Lillian, right? There was still Lillian. For some reason, every time I thought of Lillian, a wave of panic washed over me. How is she doing right now? I hated myself for it, squeezing my eyes shut. As much as I hated to admit it, I was genuinely worried about her. Lately, I hadn't dared to reflect on her unusual behavior. I kept myself constantly busy, as if trying to run away from everything connected to her. I was terrified that I might soften, forget the horrific sight of my family's tragic deaths, and throw everything away just to run into her arms. But Lillian loves me so deeply. If I'm no longer there, what will become of her? That night, I had another dream. I dreamed of our wedding in our very first life together. On the day of our wedding, I suddenly collapsed and never woke up again. Lillian sat by my hospital bed for days without eating or drinking, her face shrouded in darkness, her thoughts unreadable. Not long after, she stepped out for a moment. When she returned, she gently stroked my face, her voice eerily cold. "You go ahead first. I'll come find you soon." Shortly after, I stopped breathing on that hospital bed. Lillian stood beside the bed, the light in her eyes flickering intensely. The scene shifted abruptly. Lillian was kneeling on the ground, her gaze completely shattered as she roared at the empty air before her. "Why did you touch his family? We had a deal." Lillian cried out in sheer despair. "Why couldn't you just let him go?" "Because I love him," a chilling voice echoed. In the dream, my entire body went numb. That was unmistakably the system's voice. The system was the God Mind all along. Lillian stood up abruptly, her tone terrifyingly cold. "If you've destroyed him, then I'll destroy you too. How about that?" "You can't." The God Mind's voice remained as unfeeling as ever, though a subtle tremor vibrated beneath its surface. Lillian smirked, her eyes as dark as ink. "Then why are you so afraid of me breaking free from your control?" As she spoke, Lillian picked up a fruit knife from the table and slowly plunged it into her own chest. The arrogant smile of the girl I once knew was gone, replaced only by sheer, merciless cruelty. "If I'm not mistaken, once I wake up, I will take your place, won't I?" Lillian was right, she didn't die. The wound on her chest slowly mended itself. She had become the new god mind. She slowly knelt down, whispering, "There's nothing wrong with me loving him. The only wrong here is you, you piece of garbage." The dream ended abruptly. When I opened my eyes, pitch-black darkness still lingered outside the window. Ding! Greetings, Master Duck. The system's unfeeling chime echoed in my head. After a long pause, a soft, captivating voice spoke up. "Why did you want me to know all of this?" If I wasn't mistaken, the dream I had tonight was something Lillian wanted me to experience. As if reading my exact thoughts, she hastily explained, "It wasn't me. It's because you wanted to know these things, which is why you had that dream." "What do you mean?" Lillian let out a soft sigh. "Because you wanted to return to the real world, and you wanted your parents and family to come back to life, so you returned. And because you wanted to know why I knew everything, you learned the truth through your dream." Pausing for a moment, Lillian continued, her voice tinged with a hidden sweetness. "Because you wanted me back. That's why I could return to your side." "I wanted the system back," I said flatly. "The system is me," Lillian replied, her tone carrying a faint hint of aggrieved pouting. "So what you're saying is, whatever I wish for, it simply comes true." "Yes, exactly like that," Lillian answered, her voice laced with a subtle touch of pride. "Why did you do all this?" Lillian didn't answer right away. "Fine, if I just dream about it, I'll find out anyway. What if I don't need you anymore?" The second the words left my mouth, Lillian blurted out anxiously, "Because you successfully conquered me across 15 worlds." Panicking slightly, she added, "I didn't mean to deceive you. The previous 14 missions were different versions of me in parallel worlds. No one had ever managed to conquer me. Only you. But back then, your soul was far too weak. After I became the God Mind, I was bound by the heavenly laws and couldn't violate the rules of nature, so I couldn't directly save your family." I remained silent. Lillian continued, her voice growing softer and softer. "So I created a system. As long as someone successfully conquered me across 15 parallel worlds, they would gain the power to fulfill any desire they wished for. That's why I had the system guide you here. I'm sorry, Jason. I should have told you sooner. It's just that I couldn't enter those parallel worlds myself. I could only wait for you in this final world. But in your final world, you were so cold to me," Lillian whispered softly. "I was terrified you hated me. Terrified that once you left, you wouldn't remember me anymore. So I thought, I'd just keep you around a little bit longer." I let out a quiet sigh. "So now that I've confirmed I don't hate you, what's next?" Lillian's voice overflowed with sweet confidence. "I was summoned by you. In your heart, you still hold a place for me. And what if I had never remembered you?" I kept my tone deadpan. Lillian let out a gentle giggle. "That's impossible, right?" I couldn't help but smile. Honestly, I guess it really was impossible. "But were those task takers you mentioned actually real?" "They were completely real." "When did that happen?" I asked, feeling a bit skeptical. "After you became the God Mind. Surely no one dared to try that on you anymore, right?" "It was during our very first lifetime," Lillian explained, a hint of nonchalance in her voice. "When I turned 23, I awakened parts of my memories. In truth, before I ever met you, I had already dragged through countless cycles of reincarnation. That's precisely how I was able to become the God Mind, because I absorbed the destinies of every single task taker from all those past lives." "So, was I just a task taker to you too?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Why didn't you strip away my destiny then?" "Because I fell in love with you at first sight," she murmured softly. After Lillian had spent more than a month inside my head, I spoke up gently. "When can you leave my body? Do you not want me anymore?" A trembling panic rushed into her voice. I let out a soft sigh and shook my head. "What I mean is, when can I actually see you face to face?" The very second the words left my lips, Lillian's tall, slender silhouette materialized right before my eyes. Appearing as a delicate young woman, her face was bright with a radiant, blooming smile. "I told you, as long as you wish for it, anything can become reality." Lillian arranged our identity for herself in this world, nearly identical to her background in our very first life. Together, we walked through high school once more, then attended the same university. After graduation, I brought Lillian home to meet my family. The moment my parents set eyes on her, they couldn't conceal their absolute delight, beaming from ear to ear. "You really hit the jackpot, son." My sister, slightly tipsy after a few drinks, threw her arm around Lillian's shoulders and babbled endlessly. "Let me tell you, the girls chasing my little brother are lined up all the way to the neighboring province. If you don't treat him right, I'll introduce him to someone else." To my amusement, Lillian took my sister's ramblings completely seriously. The moment we stepped outside, she shoved me up against the car door. Her eyes narrowed. "The girls chasing you are lined up all the way to the next province, huh? That's really not true. Your sister said so herself. I'm telling you, it's not like that. I don't believe you." I could tell she was getting adorably jealous. Slightly drunk, Lillian was acting just like a stubborn child. Reaching out, I gently pinched her cheek. "Then what will it take for you to believe me? You have to say I love you 3,000. Lillian paused abruptly, her tone softening. "Ever since we made up, you've never once said I love you to me." Looking into Lillian's eyes, a slight wave of bittersweet tenderness washed over my heart. I looked at her with utmost seriousness and said, "I love you." Lillian snapped out of her drunken haze instantly. She stared at me intently, a soft, gentle smile curling up the corners of her lips. I know. I never told Lillian that a few days ago, I had another dream. It was about the very first world she had brought me into, an ancient fantasy realm. In that world, the female lead was Princess Lyra, a forgotten princess neglected in the cold palace. Everyone in the imperial court felt entitled to humiliate and abuse her. Because of that, Lyra grew up deeply gloomy and sensitive, incapable of trusting a single soul. I was merely a servant assigned to the cold palace. When I transmigrated there, Lyra was just a gloomy 10-year-old girl. The very first time I brought her meals, she nearly bit my finger off. If I took even a single step closer to her, she immediately put her guard up. The slightest mistake on my part would cause the favorability score to plummet instantly. Terrified and lost in that small world, I couldn't find a single breakthrough. All I could do was use the dumbest method possible, staying by her side day after day. Eventually, she crowned me as her prince consort and built a grand residence for me. Yet, up until the day she died, Lyra's favorability score remained stuck at 80. Back then, I assumed I would die and be erased due to mission failure. Instead, I opened my eyes to find myself right back on the very first day of the mission. Carrying the food container, I stepped into the damp, cold palace, completely prepared to have my finger bitten off again. Current favorability, 20. Surprised, I lifted my head to meet the gloomy eyes of the young girl. Ding! Favorability plus 20. In that moment, I genuinely believed the universe was favoring me. In the dream, however, I saw that Lillian had practically exhausted her entire destiny. After my failed first attempt to conquer her, she realized she couldn't guarantee that her alternate selves across parallel worlds would fall completely in love with me. So, she fractured her own soul across 15 worlds to ensure I could successfully conquer every single one. Only when I succeeded in a world could the piece of her soul scattered there return to her body in the 15th world. By the time the heavenly laws discovered what she had done, the wheels were already set in motion. The heavenly laws sealed away all of Lillian's memories, desperate to prevent her from falling in love with me and to stop the existence of my system glitch. That was why the Lillian of the 15th lifetime had carried the memories of all 14 previous lives from the very beginning, truly believing that in every single lifetime, I was destined to abandon her. And yet, despite the despair and agony, she couldn't help but fall hopelessly in love with me all over again. Right up until the moment the favorability score reached 100. The system chimed. "Master, you have done exceptionally well, departing this world in 3 seconds. 3, 2. The instant the system's voice echoed, Lillian remembered everything. She wanted to let me go, yet she was terrified that once I left, I would never return. And so, she played the pitiful victim, desperate to hold on to me and walk through the rest of this lifetime by my side. The Lillian of that moment was entirely different from any female lead I had ever encountered over all those years. When I woke up with tears streaming down my face, Lillian opened her eyes immediately. She gently leaned in, kissing away the tear at the corner of my eye, her voice dropping low and quiet. "Jason, what did you dream about?" My voice was hoarse as I replied, "Lillian, the way you look at me is truly dangerous. It's because I'm lying right next to you, yet you're dreaming about another woman. I was just curious. Why was Lyra so impossible to conquer?" I looked straight into her eyes, refusing to miss a single flicker of emotion. Sure enough, a split second of guilt flashed across Lillian's eyes. Only then did it finally click for me. Her initial approach toward me back then had been completely calculated. It was practically written all over her face. "Was it because of that?" she murmured. "Didn't she eventually turn into me anyway?" Lillian's ears flushed bright red. You know everything now?" Just as I was about to express the overwhelming surge of emotion inside me, Lillian quickly clapped a hand over my mouth. "Don't say another word, Jason. Let me do something else instead." "All right." In that moment, I was absolute certain Lillian was genuinely embarrassed. After all, she had pulled quite a few outrageous stunts across those small worlds. I began to sense that something was wrong when I accidentally spotted a single strand of silver hair on Lillian's head. My heart squeezed with an endless, agonizing ache. Lillian snuggled into my chest, nuzzling against me for a long time before finally lifting her head to look at me. "Jason, compared to being the god mind, I just want to live a quiet, peaceful life with you through this single lifetime." Thinking back, ever since I joined Lillian's side, I had completely lost the power to manifest anything I wished for. Yet I felt no anxiety whatsoever, because every single thing I could ever want was already right here in front of me. Along this journey, some people drifted away from me, while another waited for me across more than a dozen lifetimes without ever wavering. I cherish this lifetime, both fleetingly short and enduringly long, more than anyone else ever could. Beside me, Lillian's cool fingers curled inside my palm, lightly tickling my skin. I turned to look at her, breaking into a radiant smile. "I'm just glad I lived, if only to reach this exact moment with you."